like the realer you are, I feel like the even more embarrassing it becomes. And then you have these ideas and lyrics or songs, you're like, yeah, I want it to be this. And then you listen back and go, oh, I can't believe I just admitted that on record. And like, and there's something in being toxic, being a guy, and this toxic masculinity, and not feeling that we can be that vulnerable. And then add the fact that I'm black, add the fact that I'm like, there's just so many things that sort of tells you, oh, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing.
Hey, what's up, Arlo? How are you, man?
Hey, how are you guys?
I'm fantastic. I appreciate you doing this.
Oh, I appreciate you guys having me on. Sorry, I'm 1 minute late.
It's all right. We'll forgive you. Sweet. Well, I'm Adam, and it's so nice to meet you. I'm excited to hear your story.
Oh, brilliant. I'm Arlo. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet
you. Yeah, so this is about you and your journey in music, and we'll talk about the new song you put out. And I just watched the video. It's really rad.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm excited to kind of hear your journey in this industry.
Yeah. What do you want to know? We could
everything. No,
yeah. Oh, I don't want to.
We'll start.
We could be here all day.
Where were you born and raised? Born in London? Is that what I said?
Yeah, so I was born in London, East London. Have you ever been to London before?
No, unfortunately. I'm from the United States, so I'm so untraveled, man. I went to Mexico. I grew up in San Diego, and I could like throw a rock over the border into Mexico. So I've been down there a few times, or a lot of times. But aside from that, like, I suck, dude. I haven't came out to anywhere yet. I need to.
No, you should. You should definitely come to London. It's a vibe. Yeah, so I'm from London, born and raised, East London, Hackney, which is a bit like being from New York and like being in Brooklyn.
Okay, cool. Like
yeah.
Hipper spot.
Yeah. Now, growing up,
oh, it wasn't.
Okay.
I guess same with Brooklyn.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm from Brooklyn now. I'm like, I actually, really enough, I used to live in New York. I lived in New York for like 2 years. And I never ever lived in Brooklyn, but like by the time I left Brooklyn, it definitely became one of those places where everyone was like, oh, I live in Brooklyn now. I live in Flatbush, or I live in Williamsburg. And I'm like, oh, very fancy. Yeah. So,
but like in the 1990s, it was like, oh, you live in Brooklyn?
Oh, yeah. Where you say from? That's crazy. So yeah, London, born and raised, went to school there. Yeah, went to university in London. I didn't study music.
Oh, okay.
I studied, weirdly enough, politics and economics. That's what my degree is in.
Oh, would you want to be? Did you want to work in that field, or?
You know what's weird? It's yes and no. Like I wanted to, but then the moment I started studying it, I quite realized I didn't want to.
Yeah, you're like, wow.
Yeah,
this is corrupt.
This is yeah. I went to quite an international school, so you imagine all these sort of international students in one room talking about international politics. You hear a variation of opinions.
Oh, I bet.
And so I thought,
probably a variation of like a very media skewed in whatever way, you know, like, oh,
exactly.
You know, I know about your country because of these things that my country's media has told me, and vice versa. I bet it got pretty heated.
Yeah,
to say the least.
You know what's so interesting? I don't know if you're familiar with like the royal family.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What part? The conspiracies? Or
she's a lot older than me, but she was like, I think she's like 4 or 5 years older than me. But like, I guess she might have taken a few years out of university. Like, you know, like I'm going to get this wrong. It's either Princess Beatrice or Princess Eugenie.
Okay, one of the two.
One of the two. I'm going to go with Beatrice. I feel like.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's the one with red hair. I think it's Beatrice.
Okay.
She's like 4 or 5 years older than me, but she was in my class at university.
No way.
Yeah. And it weren't like a posh school, I think. Not like,
yeah.
It was like a regular university, but like, she was studying, I don't know what she was studying. You know, like when you study one of those sort of like history, political science courses, you do a bunch of different modules.
Yeah.
And we shared this one module together. And like, I just always remember her like not saying a word in class, and like us getting an email.
She's probably told
like,
not to.
That too.
They're
us
like,
getting an
if
email.
You want to go
like,
here, you got to just sit there and not speak.
And nod, yeah. I remember us getting an email being like, can everybody please like respect her privacy? Because I think people like taking pictures of her and stuff like that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I don't think I ever said any word. I never, in the year that we spent in class together, I don't think I said anything to her. But yeah, super interesting.
That's wild.
Yeah.
You'd be like, aren't you like loaded? What are you doing here?
No, exactly. And I think at that time she must have been like 7th or 8th in line to the throne or something like that. Like,
Jeez.
now it doesn't matter where she is now. There's too many of them. But like she was quite important back then. So you're like, oh. And it was weird. You would come to class and then you would like see her in the newspaper the next day. Like she'd been like at a party or something. It was very, very interesting that
Yeah, I bet. Oh my gosh, that's wild.
Yeah.
Do you come from a musical creative household at all when it comes to, you know?
No.
No.
Not a musical bone in our family. Nobody is.
Wow. Where does your voice come from then?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Like, I've never been like, I've got so many sort of musical friends now and artists in the industry, friends in the industry, and they all have the sort of same story. Like, oh yeah, I came out of the womb singing, or yeah, my mum's got tapes of me dancing to Michael Jackson. I have none of that. Like, no memory at all of singing sub the age of like 16.
Wow.
Like, I don't ever remember, like maybe singing to my friends and stuff like that as a joke, but like never being like, I don't think I ever went into a recording studio. I was never one of those people who performed at school or was in the choir or anything like that. Yeah, so never did that. And then when I was 16, I met a producer, a really big producer at the time. He had produced like a lot of like Duffy stuff. Do you remember Duffy?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Duffy. He'd done some stuff with Amy Winehouse. He'd done some stuff with Adele, and he was quite a big deal. And a friend of mine was like, "You two should meet." It's funny, I tell the story, but I can't actually remember why he suggested we meet. And then he was like, "Oh, you should try singing." Like, he was like, "You've just got an interesting talking voice. I bet you've got an interesting singing voice." And I started singing, and he was like, "You've got a really interesting tone of voice. Like, you should really like pursue it." Yeah. And I was like, "Oh no, that's not for me." So I'm an academic. I'm not a creative.
Like, I'm going into politics.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going into politics. I'm not a singer. Can you imagine? And I spent some time with him, like over the next 2 months, and recording demos. And I was like, "Oh, this seems like something fun. I could do this." And yeah, we started working together more over the next 2 or 3 years. And then we stopped. And then when I got back, when I went into uni, we started working again. And then, you get into that's how I sort of got into the industry. You find a manager, you get your first record deal. And then, it sort of takes off until it doesn't take off.
Well, obviously, like, there's a lot of steps in there, but like to meet this person, that kind of just from their suggestion of, hey, like, I think you have a cool, interesting speaking voice, or you have an interesting tone. And then you start, did this person have songs, or like, what were you doing covers in the beginning? Or like, how did you get into, like, obviously now having an artist project and being, this is your thing?
No, we wrote songs, and like the songs were, can I swear? No.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Oh, they were fucking terrible.
There you go.
No lie, they were fucking terrible. I remember I had a song that was called Incredible. And it just basically persisted of how incredible I thought I was. That's how bad it was. Like, no nuance, nothing. It was just a bad song. And then we wrote this one song, and I remember it quite vividly. It was called "Why Won't You Love Me?" And I'd written it about a friend's relationship. She was like going through this really bad relationship. And it was the sort of first song that I sort of wrote and was like, "Oh my God, like, I'm a songwriter. I can do this." Like, before that, I just sort of, I never really understood the art of music. I just thought, oh, you want something a bit catchy. Like the sort of like really juvenile infancy of me just coming into this industry and not really knowing about writing songs, and just like, well, this is the sort of music I know, like, and this is what I think is going to be popular, so I'm going to write these sort of songs. And they didn't have any substance, they didn't really say anything.
Yeah, you were kind of gearing towards like, oh, this is what is working kind of thing. Like, oh,
Exactly.
this sounds like the songs that I hear on the radio, or these are the songs that I like listening to. So you were just kind of trying to write in that vein, I guess.
Exactly. And then that song was like the sort of first song that I was like, oh, like there's actually some meaning here in my lyrics, and there's a real depth. And I think that's something that it's weird. I think actually that song has sort of set me up for the rest of my career, because I think all of my songs now have something like that. They're very meaningful. Lyrics are super important for me. I don't think I'll ever write or record a song that doesn't have that.
Yeah. It's almost like when you wrote that song, you kind of like, you knew it's like there was meaning behind it, and it was personal to you. And it was like, instead of just like, oh, I'm writing to try to sound like these people, are writing because this is working. It was like you wrote something more, I guess, authentic to yourself.
Exactly. 100%. And I think it's, to your point, it's definitely become the blueprint. It was the sort of first moment I was like, oh, this is sort of like how a song I write sounds like, and how it should sort of make me feel.
And
like now when I write music, and if I don't feel like that, I know it's not right.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Because you kind of were able to find your voice, so to speak, in that first song, or in that song.
Exactly. And like what I want to say as well, like what I want to talk about. And I think that has changed a lot. I think a lot of my earlier sort of music was very relationship driven. And now I think it's a bit more personal.
Okay.
It's more about how I'm feeling mentally, and like my actual emotions. I wouldn't say any of the songs that I have released or about to release are about relationships. If people take that, that's great, because that's what you want from music, however it resonates with you. But I think a lot of them I've written them from a real personal, introspective point of view, where it's like I'm sort of looking at myself, asking myself, what can I do better, and what have I done wrong in the situations that I'm finding myself in.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. It's like, kind of, wow. Okay. I just think I'm in recovery. I worked in AA and all that stuff. And that's kind of like one of the pieces to it, is like, you have to see where my role was in the situation. Like, where was like, I have resentments towards these people for X amount of reasons, but then it's like, well, where was my, how did I, what did I contribute to why this situation happened, so to speak?
No,
like, that's
100%.
interesting that you're, I love that.
You know what's so funny? I think it's a very American thing, which I quite like counseling and therapy is really a thing here. It's like, it's becoming bigger, but like when my first ever trip to LA, everyone I knew or anyone I met was in some sort of therapy. They were like, like all of the writers, all of the producers I worked with, they were like, oh yeah, I go to counseling, I've got a therapist. And they talk in this way where it's sort of like they third person themselves and then give advice. And I'll be like, oh, I've realized that younger Arlo had issues that older Arlo is now dealing with. And my therapist says, so I just need to be really vocal in my emotions. And I was just like, so weird. I've never seen people talk like this before. Like, I was like, there's a sort of like snobbery that you can have to it, where people are like, oh, why the hell are you talking like that? But I just found it really interesting. And I felt like what I really valued in it is their ability to look at what they were doing and work out what they were doing was, what exactly they were doing was wrong. And it was something that I definitely took from that and brought home. It was like, I'm now very conscious of my actions. And I feel like I hear it in my songs. I'm sort of like, yeah, I fucked up. I did this wrong. I said that. I was selfish. I was greedy. I was too ambitious. And actually, I think that experience, if I never had that experience in LA and saw that, I don't think I would have done the work and consistently still try and do the work now if I didn't go for that.
Wow, that's very fascinating. Yeah, because I mean, it does, the self-reflection and where my role is and everything. Like, to hear you say that, like that, I mean, I connect with that so much. Like, it's was it hard to kind of be vulnerable like that when you came to writing? Were you like, am I kind of worried about what I'm going to write, or did you not even think about it?
No, it's super embarrassing. It's super embarrassing. You sometimes, like, the realer you are, I feel like the even more embarrassing it becomes. And then you have these ideas and lyrics or songs, you're like, yeah, I want it to be this, and then you listen back and go, oh, I can't believe I just admitted that on record. And like, and there's something in being toxic, being a guy, and this toxic masculinity, and not feeling that we can be that vulnerable. And then add the fact that I'm black, add the fact that I'm like, there's just so many things that sort of tells you, oh, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. You shouldn't be this vulnerable. And it's like, oh, what happens if my friends hear this, or my family? They're gonna take Mickey out of me.
Right.
Yeah, what are they gonna think? And actually, it's sort of therapeutic, really.
I bet.
I'm like,
yeah.
Like, oh, I've got quite a lot off my shoulders here. Like, oh, I was feeling like that, and I don't feel like that anymore now.
Yeah, you got it out there, right? You put pen to paper, and it's like, okay, now it's in the world. Like, I'll give that to somebody else now. And it's almost like when I've noticed with artists, or even like social media and TikTok and all these things, where the people that find success on those apps aren't the people that are recreating a moment or something that someone else has done, or like jumping on those like trends. Like maybe it'll get them a little bit more, likes or whatever, but in like, no one's going to keep coming back to that. It's like, because it's not authentic, right? And like, it's when you're 100% authentic, and the people that are just going on the app and laying it out there, I feel like that resonates with so many more people, because you're saying whatever other people are feeling and thinking, and they just don't have the words or the courage or whatever to say it.
No, you are 100% right. And I think what's super interesting about the conversation that we're having now these days with mental health is that it's great. We're all talking about mental health, and it's like we're being conscious of people's health. I think some of the issues that sometimes I think that we have with that discussion is that actually there's a range of emotions in that we actually, people go from happy to depressed.
Right.
And we sometimes, and I'm guilty of this as well, we forget all of the other emotions in between. And like, when have you ever heard someone, you call your friend and you say, how are you, Tom? And Tom says, I'm sad. Tom will never say,
I'm fine, I'm good,
I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm good, or I'm depressed. It's always like the sort of like, there's no in between, but all those in between emotions are good. Like saying that you feel angry, saying that you feel jealous, saying that you feel sad, saying that you feel disappointed. All of those emotions are valid and real. And like, I think it's important, and I feel like it's something that I really try to talk about in my music. They're apparent. Like I've been really fortunate. I've never really suffered from depression, but I have had a range of other emotions that are just as valid to talk about.
Sure.
Like speeding is purely about disappointment and rejection. And there are people who have heard that record and be like, oh, you were really depressed. And I was like, I wasn't. I wasn't actually. I was actually having a really good time in my life. But I wasn't depressed. I wasn't in like whatever depression that word looks like to you, and when it looks like to me, I wouldn't describe my feelings at that time as that. I would describe it as exact disappointment. That I was constantly hearing no, not good enough, not right now. This isn't the time for you. There's potential there. And I wanted more than that. I wanted a yes, we'll do this. And my point there is like, those are valid emotions. And like, that's what I hope people take from those songs, is like, it's okay to feel disappointed and rejection, because actually tomorrow somebody's going to say yes. Right. It's okay to be sad, because in a few weeks you might be happy.
Well, there's the thing that I've heard other artists say, you'll get a million no's, and then all it takes is the one yes, right?
100%. I mean, at the point I was writing this music, I say before, not during the actual time I was writing, but what led to the inspiration of that music, the music that we're about to release, was just consistent no's. No's. And I think it gets to a point with, like, I hate this word potential. Because I think nobody wants to be potential. Like, fuck that. Like, I want to be.
It's almost like a condescending word, right? Like, like they don't want to say you're not good, or like, it's just like, oh, there's potential. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like,
No,
how do I potentially
100%.
get to the next level? Like, give me some,
That too.
give me some goddamn advice.
I'll be like, I'm tired. Like I said to one of my managers, I'm tired of being potential. Like, and it's not even so much like with me, it was definitely more career based, but like even just relationship wise, like I've got friends who are all at this sort of, well, they feel like they're at this age where they're just like, oh, I'm ready to find my wife or my husband. I'm ready to have kids. I'm tired of being an option or potential. I want someone to pick me. I want someone to choose me. And I think
Right.
that is definitely how I felt in my sort of career aspect. I just felt like, oh, I'm fed up now. Like me and you, I ain't got time for another get to know each other stage, or we're gonna figure it out kind of stage. I want someone to go, hey Arlo, I pick you, you're my team. And I think that's what a lot of those songs, Speeding in particular, is about.
When it comes to that, like, how did you kind of continue to have that, like, the fire to continue through that? I mean, to hear a bunch of people say, I don't know if it's a bunch of people, I'm just going to generalize, say
It was a bunch.
said no, and you're like, God, like, I know these are good songs, or I know I should be doing this, and like having people continually say no. How do you just go, I don't, yeah, that person said no, but I know in my heart and I know in myself that I'm good enough to do this. Like, that's probably, I mean, that must be a pretty hard thing to do, right? To keep moving forward. Like, was there like, did you get some validation earlier on, or at one point did you get like your first, like, okay, like maybe you had a bunch of no's and then it was like a yes, or a bunch of no's and then this thing happened and you're like, okay, now I can keep moving forward? Or was there, I mean, obviously now you have that, but I meant prior to getting the, like the next piece of the puzzle, so to speak, to move forward?
No, I think what I learned during that process is that it has to come from you. There is a delusion that any creative artist has to have, that like, I am the fucking shit. And it's just, you just don't know it yet. I know it. You just don't know. You're gonna figure it out soon. All this time I've been telling you I'm fucking dope. Like, you're gonna learn that soon. And the moment you start believing that, and I'm sure you hear so many guys saying, bro, like, you just have to sort of persevere and believe it. It honestly is so true, because people want to work with people that think they're stars. People want to be around people, like when you meet music guys who are so confident in what they do, you can feel it and see it in them. Like, you're like, well, that guy's a star, that girl's a star, I'm gonna see it in them. And like, if you walk into the room and you're like, do you like the music? What do you think? Like, oh, can I have that? And I started realizing that I had to be confident in what, like, I'm not going to be Beyonce. I'm not going to be Adele. I'm not going to be Michael Jackson. All I can be is myself. And if I can be the best myself I can be, people are going to go, you know what, I quite like that David Arlo guy. I quite like what he does. And that's what I had to get to. And the position that I had to get myself into a place where I go, actually, what I am doing is good. And then once you start believing that, it starts going in a direction.
Yeah. Well, you're 100% correct when it comes to like having that confidence. Delusion, I guess, would be you're like, it's like, yeah, I know I'm good. Like, I obviously you have, I don't know. It's like there has to be some skilled backing in your brain. Like, in your brain, like, I am good. So there's not really, it's not delusion, but it's like you need, people will hear this. I don't know. It's like they will understand, but having the confidence there to go into a room, and if you're kind of like passive and like, I think this is good. What do you think? Versus, oh, wait till you hear this. This song is so good. Like, then I think the person's already like, oh, this is probably pretty good. This person's really pushing this at me. Versus like, oh, 100%. He's not even really behind it. So this might suck. Like, am I wasting my time with this?
100%. I think confidence is just a key to anything, being any sort of creative. Like, people want to work with people. Don't have me tell you what I think you should make. You should be coming in telling me, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is what the music. And like, people, I see it, people resonate with that all the time. They're like, well, he knows or she knows exactly the kind of artist they want to be, and like, I fuck with that. Like, that's the, and it took me a while to realize that, because you could sometimes be a victim of all of the voices around you. Oh, you need to be a bit this, you need to be that. And when you find the confidence in what you do and go, yeah, actually, actually, this is how I sound best, and this is the kind of music I want to make. It just all seems to fall into place. And I know there's probably people who will listen to this or watch it go, yeah, it's so easy to say that. It does take time.
Yeah.
Rome was not built in a day. It takes, I saw a t-shirt the other day that said Beyonce was not built in a day. And it's like, I thought that's so funny because like we look at her as like the epitome of greatness. So like sort of the greatest artist of our generation. And like, and I'm sure she'll be the first person to say like, I wasn't always like this. Like,
no, she was singing like, yeah, like I think she sang like in front of barbershops when she was like in Texas or something, like Houston or something like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, we have to give ourselves grace as artists. And like tomorrow, what are we gonna get? If we keep working at this, what are we gonna get better?
Right. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with everything you're saying when it comes to like, yeah, it's like if you don't go in there knowing what your product is, like who's gonna buy it, I guess, so to speak. Like, you know, and it is hard to find your voice. I mean, I was on terrestrial radio for almost 20 years prior to really just doing the podcast thing full time. But that was the hardest thing. Everyone, like, you try to emulate the people that you looked up to or heard. Like, you want to sound like so-and-so because you like their music, but you want to sound like Beyonce. And it's like, well, there's already a Beyonce. You're not going to ever be Beyonce, but no one's ever going to, you know what I mean? Like, she already exists. She already exists, but you could be her as good as Beyonce or write a song and be at that level. But you have to be, you know, Arlo could do that, but you trying to be Beyonce and write, you know, whatever, it doesn't make sense. But it's the hardest thing to like to really like do. Like they just go, oh, be yourself, and it's like, well, that's hard. It's I don't know. It's really weird. It's hard to be yourself, not as I don't know, but it is really difficult.
It's hard to. I think you're actually on it. It's hard to be yourself when actually everybody around you is telling you that being someone else might actually potentially be better
for you. Right. Exactly.
It's so true. So true.
So you had a couple songs prior to putting out Speeding. You know, Settled did really, really well. And from there, like you signed to was Arista through Speeding? Like how did you like form that, putting that song out, and then what do you have coming up?
No, so I signed to Arista in 2020, during the pandemic.
23.
Really? Middle of the pandemic, which was very interesting. I got signed off a bunch of demos that Speeding weren't in one of those, in the demos. And then we spent the last 2 years just writing, flying back and forth from London to LA during the pandemic. Yeah, which obviously during when travel bans.
Right, of course.
We're like illegally flying. But it was like hell because I think there was times where like you were allowed to fly, but like there was moments where you weren't allowed to fly directly from London to New York, to LA. So you would have to stay. So I would have to fly to the Dominican Republic, which I sound so ungrateful, but I'm telling you, it was hell. You would fly to the Dominican Republic for like 2 weeks. No, 3 weeks.
Like
it was 15
quarantine
days,
or something like that.
For like 15 days on your own in like a really sort of budget, all-inclusive hotel that was like super far from anything. So you can't even leave.
Yeah, you're just kind of
and
stuck.
then
they're like, there. Make sure you don't, like have the virus or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, because you don't want to go anywhere because you don't want to catch anything which will jeopardize the trip that's already been paid for you to get to LA. And then you'll get this thing like, I don't know if you've ever been to these sort of all-inclusive hotels. And I did this about 3 times. I did it once earlier in the year in like January. So I flew to Dominican Republic, then did it again. I went to Mexico, and then I did it again and I went to DR. But you do these things where you're like in these all-inclusive hotels that you're really only ever supposed to stay there for like 3 or 4 days, because that's the way they cater them. And they're like, so say they have a menu, the menu's from Monday to Thursday. Come Friday, that menu starts again.
Yeah, you're back at Monday.
So I could have swore we had nachos on Monday. Like, this is exactly the same thing. It got to the point where the waiters used to like clap when they saw me. So like, oh, here he comes again. Like,
oh, here he is.
You would
3 weeks in a row.
You would literally only see couples there, and they're like on their anniversary or their honeymoon, and here you got me Billy No Mates, like my manager didn't come, it was just me on my own, and I would do these long trips. But yeah, it was great. I ended up going to LA and working with a bunch of amazing writers and producers. And yeah, that's sort of how those songs came about. Like, and a lot of the stuff that we're getting up to release, the tracks, they've all come from those trips.
That's exciting. So Speeding is the first of that set.
Yes, Speeding's the first, and sort of it's weird because I feel like we've had the song for a long time. It's probably one of the first things I wrote when I came out to LA. So it's weird because it's like I say this a lot. I'm not in the same place as that song is anymore as a person.
Right.
Again, like I said, it's a lot about rejection and removing yourself from people that don't serve you. And I feel like I'm such in a much better place that like I'm like, oh, I couldn't imagine removing myself from the people I'm around now because they're my people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was definitely a moment in my life where I definitely felt like confused. And so, yeah, it felt like the right first single to go with.
Okay. And is that going to be part of a bigger project, or you're going to put a bunch of singles out? Like, what is kind of your
It'd definitely be a
layout
project
moving forward? Oh, cool.
But there'll definitely be a project, but I think we're going to go a couple of singles next. More
makes sense.
Yeah. And I think Speeding is definitely like the sound, but I think there's going to be other stuff that I think you just get to hear my voice and some of my story more. And then I think what I really like about Speeding, I think it really does show that sound, the soundscape of like what the rest of the body of work will kind of sound like, this sort of real big, and I was gonna say enchanting, but that's not the right word, sort of like euphoric.
Yeah.
Feeling to it. I think a lot of the songs have that.
Were you getting like were like Rivers and those other songs prior, were those written when you were in London? Like, was this your first kind of trip to LA to do like write music and record music?
Yeah, 100%. All of those songs I've released before were all in London, and then everything I've written on that's coming out now has either been written. Yeah, I think they've all been written
in LA. Was that a different, like how different was that? And were you like were you inspired in different ways coming to LA versus writing in London, or no?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like I said, that whole journey of just like everybody talking about their therapy and like that definitely inspired me.
Yeah.
And, like,
sure.
It definitely made me want to be honest, a bit more honest in the music. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge in the first place of like doing it. Like, oh, there's a lot of pressure. You feel like you don't really like work. It's weird. You meet someone who you're going to write a song with. Then you meet them for 10 minutes, you have a coffee, you grab something to eat, and you're like, cool, we're going to tell you my whole life story so we can write a hit song.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to tell you my whole life story. Like, you're practically a stranger 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. And now you've got to like open up completely about everything.
Exactly. Even things I wouldn't even tell my closest friends, I'm like telling you to make this song make sense.
Right. That's interesting. I'm sure that has to be difficult, especially in the very beginning. You're like, like, what am I getting myself into? I got to tell this person some deep, dark secrets or something I've never even told anyone else, my family, friends, whatever it may be.
No, 100%. And I think what I've been really fortunate is I've worked with the same people now for the last 2 years. So they've sort of become my friends, like Marcus, who I wrote, Semaj, who I wrote Speeding with. It's like, I was about to call him my best friend, but like, he's not my best friend. I was a reach. I hope he doesn't see this. But he's like I would say he's one of my really good friends. Like we talk all the time, and it's not about music. And I feel like we've built a real brotherhood. Like, we support each other, and like, he's a really amazing songwriter. He's written songs with Giveon and Khalid, and like he's done some amazing stuff. And like Malay has done like who also co-wrote and produced the 2-track Ocean albums, and so they're like amazing people we've worked with, and like to be able to call them up and ask them for advice, or be like, hey, I don't understand this, or should I be doing this, or I'm worked on this record, what do you think of this? Like, and then also have that relationship with them outside of music is just a blessing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I love what you're doing thus far. I can't wait to hear the next batch of songs or the next single.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, your voice is incredible.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, and thanks for your time, Arlo. This has been so much fun.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the conversation.
No, thank you. I have one more question. We kind of touched on it a bit. I mean, a lot kind of in the middle, but I'm just going to ask it again. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Don't do it. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Give up. Go get a degree in political science.
Go get a real job. The amount is so funny. I was talking to someone about that the other day. The amount of times as creatives, people say to us, like, you should go get a real job. Like, it's so disheartening. Like, what does that even mean? Like, go get a real job. But to
like,
answer your
this
question,
isn't a real job. Like, I'm not working my ass off. Like, probably more, like, definitely more than 8 hours, 40 hours a
there
week.
you go.
You know what I mean? 8 hours a day.
Yeah. Advice. You have to work hard. Like, I think, like, so I see so many young artists and just everyone in the creative field. And so I think sometimes we can see things on social media and we think, oh, it's so easy. It's so much goes in. Even, like, that music video, just speeding, to like 2 days to shoot and like 2 weeks to make, like 2 or 3 weeks, like countless ideas and passes.
Well, it looks like a film. I mean, it looks so good. I mean, the way it's shot.
I appreciate
everything. Yeah,
I appreciate it. But like, you have to work hard, is what I'd say. The buck starts with you and ends with you. If you think somebody's going to come in and do this with your career, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, in the fairy tales it happens once in the blue moon, but like, majority of people, you see the biggest artists in the world, majority of the time they got there through their hard work and being the CEO of their own sort of business and their artistry, to like directing it. And then I'd say, don't give up. Like, you have to have like that delusion we talked about earlier and that confidence, and like, you're going to hear a lot of no's. So, you know, when I hear a no, like, my manager laughs at this, I just go to bed. If I get bad news about something, I don't know, we didn't make something. Well, just literally, I'll be on a Zoom like this, they'll tell me that, and I'll be like, great, turn my laptop off, go to bed, wake up in the morning, it's like, it's not that bad. Yeah. Okay, cool, you didn't make that. I guarantee in a few days' time, you'll get some good news for something else. So I would say that, yeah, like, I would say those would be my big advice. Work hard, don't quit, don't give up. And like, you have to be the leader of it. You have to take the steering wheel and charge forward with it.